Today I will be speaking to Maurits Groen, who best can be described as an environmental entrepreneur and innovator. As early as the 1970s of the last century, Maurits has been a consultant to the Dutch government and to Dutch enterprises on how a greener future for them would look like. He has been publishing and communicating about the environment and climate change for over 40 decades. Maurits has also been known for getting the inconvenient truth of Al Gore, the vice president under the Clinton administration, to Amsterdam and to discuss with Mr. Gore how he was looking at the future of the world. As an entrepreneur, Maurits also did something physical. He actually developed a battery light, a high-power battery light called the Waka Waka light, which was distributed in parts all over the world where there was darkness at night, at the end of wars, and over 1 million of these lights have been distributed to people who needed it most. In 2015, Maurits was elected Influencer of the Year by the very established Dutch newspaper Trouw, the greenest influencer of the Netherlands, which is something which he has been for a long time. I'm very happy to speak to Maurits Groen today. So, Maurits, thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us. You mentioned that you will not be present at the COP26, but you will be a very anxious and interested follower. It is said that after the Paris conference now 5 years ago, COP26 is the most important conference in the series. Do you agree? Can you explain why this is?
Yes, I indeed do agree to that, because it's been 5 years since the Paris Agreement, and it was agreed at that time that after 5 years there was an evaluation of the follow-up by the countries. More than 190 countries signed up to the Treaty of Paris back in 2015 to see whether they had actually implemented the plans that they had submitted beforehand in 2015. So it's a stock taking at the moment, actually. And it's also the time when the IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, Governmental Panel on Climate Change, the scientific body of thousands of scientists around the world that evaluate developments, have submitted their state of the union, so to say. I mean, they have given an evaluation of what's actually happening with climate disruption, as I prefer to call it, because change can be a very neutral and sometimes even pleasant development, and yes, what we're experiencing is disruption. So they submitted their actual evaluation of the situation, and the governments had to submit what they had been doing over the last 5-6 years. So this is a very important point, Glasgow, taking stock of what's happening in the real world, in the climate, and taking stock of what has been implemented by countries. And very unfortunately, both the situation is running out of hand quite rapidly, especially on a human, even on a human scale, but also on a geo scale, so to say. Developments that we are seeing right now would normally have taken thousands or even tens of thousands of years. And we are advancing climate disruption at a speed which is incomprehensible almost. And the worrying thing, of course, is that almost none of the countries signed up to the Paris Agreement have implemented the plans that they had submitted by then. So it's a very unfortunate situation. And the COP in Glasgow is very important because that will be very apparent. So the urgency to take real measures before we run into real trouble, because climate tipping points will be passed in, say, 8-9 years, will become very apparent. So that's why Glasgow is very important.
But that's also the message I hear in the last weeks in the news, that matters are far worse than we actually think, that sea levels are going to rise not 1 meter, but by 1.20 meters up to 2 meters. We have poorer countries who cannot cope with all the changes, so the Western world needs to speed up even more. So this year of 2050, which is a long way away for all of us living today, actually needs to come forward by 5-10 years?
I think even more. When we realized that in Paris, we agreed as a global community not to pass the 2 degrees centigrade temperature rise globally, and preferably not to pass 1.5 degrees. Well, 1.5 is over. I mean, even at the present developments, we will even go beyond 2.7 degrees, which is disastrous. And Mark Linus, the English renowned author of the book 6 Degrees, outlining the actual consequences of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 degrees global temperature rise. 2.7, which we will certainly reach within even within a few decades, is really devastating. So I think that we should, in order to avoid real big catastrophes on a global scale permanently, we should speed up and actually go carbon neutral by 2030, 35. I mean, it would seem incomprehensible to do that, to achieve that, but we have seen this example of the COVID-19 development, where governments all around the world suddenly could completely and drastically take measures that we had never thought of, dreamt of, would be possible. So this COVID-19 thing is a real worrying development, but it's nothing compared to the climate disruption that we will be facing, and not for 1 or 2 or 3 years, but well, almost permanently for thousands of years, if we do not take that measure. So we really are in a position that we have no choice, really.
No. And I think there was never a COVID-19 conference in which all of the world met. Everybody took action, everybody acted. And that's my question also about a conference like the COP26. I remember Paris to be a conference that was actually where at the end time was stopped because we could not come to a conclusion. And then finally, thanks to a few people, we reached the Paris Climate Agreement. Do you think that such a breakthrough, that such an urgency will also be present at Glasgow?
I'm not too optimistic, actually, unfortunately. Xi, the boss of China, has announced that he will not attend. Putin from Russia has announced he will not attend, and a number of other leaders also. So if this is not something where every leader in the world is actually personally present, it will be very hard to reach such a breakthrough situation.
Yes.
So I'm not too optimistic about that. And again, that's very worrying because the time is running out very rapidly.
That actually brings me to another question. Like if you look at France some weeks ago, or if you look at the Netherlands, where an NGO like Urgenda actually took the government to court to make them keep their commitment to curb climate change. Do you think that these organizations, that these NGOs concerned with climate will determine the agenda for the next years and will become more powerful?
I think that the real actual developments will boost their influence, actually. Yesterday, ABP, which is the third biggest pension fund in the world, it happens to be a Dutch pension fund because we are eager to save for our old age. It's over 500 billion euros in stock worth. They announced that they will completely withdraw from investments in fossil fuels, whether it be coal, oil, or gas. So that was a result of pressure by another Dutch NGO, ABP Fossilvrij, fossil free. Shell has been summoned to court by Friends of the Earth in the Netherlands, has lost twice, Shell. So they are now obliged by the judiciary to take real drastic measures to curb their CO2 emissions. So I think that where politics, where governments fail to act in an urgent way and in a way that's appropriate to the problems that we are facing, the judiciary will take its role. Unfortunately, they are more and more referring to human rights. Say 10 years ago, it was incomprehensible that human rights would be connected to something like climate disruption, because what would the two on Earth have to do with each other? But people are starting to link the dots, and they see that climate disruption will cause not only droughts and hurricanes and other disasters, natural disasters, coral bleaching, whatever you have, but that will lead to conflict, that will lead to war, that will lead to refugees, and that will very, very severely impair the livelihood and the peaceful living together of people. So it's a real matter of urgency that this will be taken on by the judiciary, where governments fail to act.
So in other words, climate disruption then becomes the disruption of the world order in some kind of way.
Well, not some kind of way. I mean, that's actually what's already gradually unfolding in different parts of the world. The incidents are following each other very rapidly at the moment, and we are still only at 1 degree Celsius. And what's in the offing, the effect of the CO2 emissions over the last 30 years, which are not yet completely, I say that, absorbed by the climate, which is a very slow moving organism, so to say. So we still have a lot in the offing which will have effect. So even if we would stop emitting CO2 and other greenhouse gases immediately today, completely, even then, the rising temperatures would still take place. So the urgency is really extreme.
It's something that you do not hear too often today, but it is like a big oil tanker that has to start braking at the Calais Channel before it reaches the harbor of Rotterdam. I hope that over the next week we will hear the word climate disruption a little bit more often than climate change, as you were saying. I'm very anxious to see what is going to happen over the next 2 weeks. I would say I'm looking forward to speaking to you again at the end of this month and to make an evaluation of the conference and see whether you're satisfied, whether there are new insights, and whether there is a measure of success that we can take. Thank you very much for now, Maurits.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.